What you're about to hear is going to make your blood boil, and I need you to stay with me until the very end because the wrestling world as we know it just got turned completely upside down, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that what happened on Monday Night Raw this week might be the single most controversial decision in WWE history. And yes, I'm including the Montreal Screw-Up, I'm including the Centimeter Punk walkout, I'm including every single backstage political nightmare you can think of. Because what Adam Pearce just did to Bron Breakker is absolutely insane, and before you click away thinking you know what happened, trust me, you don't know the half of it, and by the time I'm done explaining every single detail of this situation, you're going to be just as furious as I am right now. We're talking about a generational talent, a third-generation superstar from one of the most legendary families in professional wrestling history, the nephew of Scott Steiner, the son of Rick Steiner, a man who has been groomed since birth to be a WWE champion, someone who has everything it takes to be the face of this company for the next 15 years, and Adam Pearce, in what can only be described as the most cowardly, spineless, corporate decision I've ever witnessed, has permanently banned Bron Breakker from WWE, and I want you to let that sink in for a moment because we're not talking about a suspension, we're not talking about a fine, we're not talking about some kind of probationary period, we are talking about a permanent ban from the company that his family helped build, and all of this stems from an incident involving Penta El Zero Miedo and Dragon Lee on Raw, two performers who, let's be completely honest here, have done absolutely nothing to deserve the protection they're getting from management right now. Let me paint the picture for you because if you missed Raw this week, you missed one of the most explosive moments in recent memory, and it all started when Penta and Dragon Lee decided to run their mouths during a backstage segment, talking about how they are the future of the company, how they are going to revolutionize WWE, how nobody in the locker room can touch them, and I'm sitting there watching this thinking to myself, who are these guys kidding? Because while I respect their work in other promotions, they haven't done anything in WWE to warrant this level of arrogance, and apparently Bron Breakker felt the exact same way because later in the show, he confronted both of them in the hallway, and what started as a verbal exchange quickly escalated into a physical altercation that left both Penta and Dragon Lee laid out on the concrete floor, and look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what Bron did was the right thing to do from a professional standpoint, but I will tell you that it was absolutely the right thing to do from a competitive standpoint, because in what world do we live in where wrestlers can talk trash and not expect any consequences? In what world do we live in where management is more concerned about protecting newcomers than they are about protecting the integrity of their locker room? And in what world do we live in where a guy like Bron Breakker, who has been carrying the flag for WWE's developmental system for years, gets permanently banned while other superstars have done far worse and gotten nothing more than a slap on the wrist? The hypocrisy is staggering, and what makes this even more infuriating is that Adam Pearce made this decision without any kind of investigation, without any kind of hearing, without giving Bron an opportunity to explain his side of the story, and that right there should tell you everything you need to know about the current state of WWE management, because this isn't about doing what's right, this is about doing what's politically convenient, this is about protecting their new toys at the expense of homegrown talent, and I am sick and tired of watching this company destroy the careers of people who have given everything to get to where they are. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking that Bron should have controlled his emotions, you're thinking that he should have been more professional, you're thinking that there's no excuse for putting your hands on another performer outside of a sanctioned match, and to those people I say you are completely missing the point of what professional wrestling is supposed to be about, because this is a business that was built on passion, this is a business that was built on intensity, this is a business that was built on performers who were willing to go to war for their spot on the card, and somewhere along the way, WWE forgot about all of that and turned into this sanitized, corporate, politically correct version of what wrestling used to be, and I'm not saying we should go back to the Wild West days where anything goes, but I am saying that there needs to be a balance between maintaining order and allowing performers to have the kind of fire that makes this business exciting in the first place. Bron Breakker has that fire, Bron Breakker has that intensity, Bron Breakker has that old school mentality that made his uncle and his father legends in this industry, and instead of harnessing that energy and channeling it into something productive, Adam Pearce decided to just eliminate the problem altogether by banning him permanently, and that is the most short-sighted, idiotic decision I have ever seen from someone in a position of authority in WWE. Let's talk about the actual incident for a moment because the details matter here, and from multiple reports that have come out from people who were backstage at Raw, what actually happened was that Penta and Dragon Lee were cutting a promo in catering, talking about how they were going to dominate the tag team division, talking about how nobody in WWE could match their Lucha Libre style, talking about how they were going to expose everyone on the roster as inferior talents, and Bron Breakker who was sitting nearby eating his meal, heard all of this and initially tried to ignore it, but then Penta apparently made a comment about how the Steiner family was washed up and irrelevant in modern wrestling, and that was the moment when Bron stood up from his table, walked over to where they were standing, and told them to their faces that if they wanted to prove they were as good as they claimed to be, they should challenge him to a match instead of running their mouths in catering. According to witnesses, Dragon Lee responded by laughing in Bron's face and saying something along the lines of the WWE brass already told them they didn't have to wrestle guys like him because they were being protected for bigger storylines, and that comment, whether it was true or not, was apparently what set Bron off because he immediately grabbed Dragon Lee by the collar and slammed him against the wall, and when Penta tried to intervene, Bron hit him with a clothesline that sent him crashing into a table full of food, and by the time security arrived to break everything up, both Penta and Dragon Lee were on the ground, and Bron was standing over them yelling about how nobody disrespects his family and gets away with it. Now here's where things get really interesting, because after the incident, Bron was immediately escorted to Adam Pearce's office, and according to sources who were in the hallway outside that office, there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of heated discussion, and at one point Bron could be heard saying that he didn't regret what he did and that he would do it again if he had to, and that apparent lack of remorse is what led Adam Pearce to make the decision to ban him permanently from WWE. But what Adam Pearce didn't take into account was the context of the situation. What he didn't take into account was the fact that Penta and Dragon Lee had been antagonizing Bron for weeks with their comments about legacy wrestlers being outdated. What he didn't take into account was the fact that multiple other superstars in the locker room have been complaining about how Penta and Dragon Lee have been getting preferential treatment since they arrived in WWE. And what he definitely didn't take into account was the fact that his decision to permanently ban Bron Breakker was going to create a massive divide in the locker room between the veterans who support Bron and the newer talent who are relieved that someone who could physically dominate them is now gone. The fallout from this decision is going to be catastrophic for WWE, and I genuinely believe that Adam Pearce has no idea what he's just unleashed, because you now have a situation where half the roster thinks management will throw them under the bus at the first sign of controversy, and the other half thinks they can say and do whatever they want because they'll be protected by the office, and that is not a healthy environment for anyone involved in this business. What makes this situation even more maddening is that WWE has a long history of giving second chances to performers who have done far worse than what Bron Breakker did, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to turn this into a witch hunt, but we all know about the superstars who have gotten into legitimate fights backstage. We all know about the superstars who have violated the wellness policy multiple times. We all know about the superstars who have said or done things outside of WWE that should have gotten them fired, but instead they got a brief suspension and then came back like nothing ever happened. And yet somehow Bron Breakker, who defended his family's honor and stood up for himself against two guys who were disrespecting him, gets permanently banned without any opportunity for redemption, without any opportunity to make things right, without any opportunity to prove that he learned from his mistake. The inconsistency in how WWE handles discipline is absolutely mind-boggling, and it sends a message to the entire roster that the rules only apply to certain people, and if you're one of the chosen favorites, you can get away with murder, but if you're not, you better walk on eggshells because one mistake could end your career forever, and that is not how a billion-dollar company should be operating. I also want to address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that Penta and Dragon Lee are both incredibly talented performers who have had amazing careers outside of WWE, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm attacking them personally or suggesting that they don't deserve to be in WWE, because they absolutely do deserve to be there based on their in-ring abilities alone. But what I am saying is that their behavior leading up to this incident was unprofessional and disrespectful, and the fact that WWE management is choosing to protect them at the expense of Bron Breakker tells me that there's something else going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. Maybe there's a big storyline planned for Penta and Dragon Lee that WWE doesn't want to derail. Maybe there's a merchandise deal in the works that they don't want to jeopardize. Maybe there's pressure from outside sponsors or investors who want to see more international talent featured prominently on WWE programming. I don't know what the real reason is, but what I do know is that the decision to permanently ban Bron Breakker doesn't make sense from a business perspective. It doesn't make sense from a competitive perspective, and it definitely doesn't make sense from a fairness perspective, and the fact that Adam Pearce is willing to sacrifice one of the most promising young talents in the company to protect two guys who haven't proven themselves in WWE yet is absolutely baffling to me. Let's also talk about the precedent that this sets for the future of WWE, because if this decision stands, what's to stop other superstars from filing complaints every time they get into a heated argument with someone backstage? What's to stop management from banning anyone who shows any kind of passion or intensity? What's to stop WWE from becoming this bland, lifeless product where everyone is afraid to say or do anything that might be construed as controversial because they are terrified of losing their jobs? Professional wrestling is supposed to be edgy, professional wrestling is supposed to be unpredictable, professional wrestling is supposed to have moments that make you uncomfortable and make you question what you just saw, and if WWE continues down this path of over-sanitizing everything and punishing anyone who steps out of line even slightly, we're going to end up with a product that nobody wants to watch, and the ratings are going to continue to decline, and eventually WWE is going to wonder why they can't create new stars anymore, and the answer is going to be because they keep getting rid of the people who have the potential to be stars in favor of protecting people who management thinks will be more controllable and more marketable. Another aspect of this situation that I find deeply troubling is the way that Adam Pearce handled the announcement of Bron's permanent ban, because instead of addressing it in a private meeting or issuing a simple statement, he decided to make a spectacle out of it by announcing it on live television during Raw, and you could see the shock on the faces of the other superstars who were standing in the ring when he made the announcement, and you could hear the confusion in the crowd because nobody expected something this severe, and the way that Adam Pearce delivered the news with this stern, authoritative tone like he was some kind of judge handing down a sentence made the whole thing feel even more degrading and disrespectful to Bron and his family. It was a power move designed to send a message to the rest of the roster that Adam Pearce is in charge and that nobody is above the rules, but what it actually did was make Adam Pearce look like a tyrant who gets off on destroying people's careers, and I can guarantee you that there are dozens of wrestlers backstage right now who are absolutely furious about how this was handled. And there are probably several who are considering speaking out publicly about it, and if that happens, WWE is going to have a full-blown mutiny on their hands, and they are going to have nobody to blame but themselves for creating this toxic environment. I want to take a moment to talk about Bron Breakker's family because this ban doesn't just affect him, it affects his entire legacy, and the Steiner family has been a part of professional wrestling for decades, and Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner have both given so much to this industry, and they raised Bron to respect the business, to work hard, to never back down from a challenge, and everything that Bron did in that altercation with Penta and Dragon Lee was a reflection of the values that his family instilled in him, and now because of one incident, because of one moment of passion, his entire WWE career is over before it ever really had a chance to reach its full potential. I can't imagine how Rick Steiner must feel right now. I can't imagine how Scott Steiner must feel right now, watching their family's legacy get tarnished by a decision that was made by someone who has probably never laced up a pair of boots in his entire life, and I can't imagine how Bron himself must feel knowing that everything he worked for, everything he sacrificed, all the hours in the gym, all the matches in front of small crowds, all the travel, all the pain, all of it is now meaningless, because Adam Pearce decided that he was too much of a liability to keep around. The wrestling community's reaction to this news has been absolutely explosive, and social media has been flooded with people expressing their outrage, expressing their support for Bron, expressing their disappointment in WWE management, and there have been hashtags trending worldwide calling for Adam Pearce to reverse his decision, calling for Triple H to intervene, calling for Vince McMahon to come back and fix this mess, and while I don't think any of those things are going to happen, it does show that the fans are not happy with this decision, and WWE needs to understand that the fans are the ones who ultimately determine who succeeds and who fails in this business, and if the fans turn on WWE because of how they handled this situation, there's going to be serious financial consequences, and sponsors are going to start pulling out, and TV deals are going to become harder to negotiate, and the whole empire could start crumbling, and all because Adam Pearce couldn't figure out a better way to handle a backstage altercation than permanently banning one of the most talented young performers on the roster. There's also been speculation about what Bron Breakker is going to do next, and the rumors are already flying that AEW has reached out to him, that New Japan has reached out to him, that Impact Wrestling has reached out to him, and while Bron hasn't made any public statements yet, I would not be surprised if we see him show up in another promotion within the next few months, and when that happens, WWE is going to regret this decision so much because Bron is going to go to another company, he's going to become a mega star, he's going to main event shows, he's going to sell merchandise, he's going to draw ratings, and WWE is going to be sitting there wondering why they let him slip through their fingers, and the answer is going to be because they prioritized protecting two guys who weren't even being disrespectful in a sanctioned environment over keeping one of the most promising talents they've developed in years. The irony of this entire situation is that WWE has spent the last several years trying to rebuild their developmental system, trying to create homegrown stars, trying to prove that they don't need to rely on independent wrestlers or international talent to fill their roster, and then the moment one of their homegrown stars shows any kind of real personality or intensity, they ban him permanently, and that sends a message to everyone coming up through the system that WWE doesn't actually want stars, they want robots who will do exactly what they are told and never step out of line. I need to address something that I've seen some people saying online, which is that Bron deserved this punishment because he put his hands on another performer and that there's no excuse for that kind of behavior in a professional environment. And to those people I say, you clearly have never worked in a competitive industry where egos clash and tensions run high on a daily basis, because backstage altercations happen in WWE all the time. They happen in every wrestling promotion, they happen in every professional sports league, they happen in Hollywood, they happen in the music industry, they happen anywhere you have highly competitive, highly driven individuals all fighting for the same limited spots at the top. And the difference is that in most industries, when these altercations happen, cooler heads prevail, people are separated, they are given time to cool off, maybe they are fined or suspended for a short period, and then they move on with their careers. But in this case, Pearce decided that the appropriate response was to end Bron's career entirely, and that is such a disproportionate punishment for the offense that it makes you question whether there were other factors at play in this decision. Speaking of other factors, there have been whispers backstage that this decision wasn't actually Pearce's alone, and that there were other executives involved who pushed for the permanent ban because they viewed Bron as someone who couldn't be controlled, someone who was too much like his uncle Scott Steiner in terms of being outspoken and unwilling to play political games. And if that's true, then this whole situation is even more disgusting than I initially thought, because it means that WWE is actively trying to weed out anyone with a strong personality, anyone who might challenge authority, anyone who might stand up for themselves when they feel they are being treated unfairly, and they want to create a roster full of yes men who will smile and nod and do whatever they are told without question. And that is the death of creativity in professional wrestling, that is the death of authentic character development, and that is the death of the kind of programming that made WWE successful in the first place. What really gets me fired up about this entire situation is the double standard that exists in WWE when it comes to how they treat different performers, because we've seen superstars get into legitimate fist fights backstage and get nothing more than a fine. We've seen superstars show up to events under the influence and get nothing more than a wellness policy violation. We've seen superstars no-show events and get nothing more than a stern talking to. And yet Bron Breakker, who was provoked, who was defending his family's honor, who was standing up against two guys who were being disrespectful, gets permanently banned. And the only explanation for this kind of inconsistency is either gross incompetence on the part of WWE management or deliberate bias against certain performers, and either way, it's completely unacceptable, and it's the kind of thing that should make every single person who works for WWE question whether they are being treated fairly or whether they are one bad day away from having their entire career destroyed by someone in the office who has a vendetta against them. The timing of this ban is also incredibly suspicious, because it comes right at a moment when Bron was starting to gain serious momentum with the audience, when fans were starting to really get behind him, when it looked like he might be on the verge of a major push, and now all of that is gone, and I can't help but wonder if that was intentional, if there were people in the back who saw Bron's rising popularity as a threat to their own agendas or to the performers they wanted to push instead. And they used this incident as an excuse to get rid of him before he became too big to control. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know, but when you've been watching wrestling as long as I have, when you've seen how these things play out behind the scenes, when you've heard the stories from former wrestlers about the political games that get played in every major promotion, you start to realize that nothing happens by accident in this business, and every decision is calculated to benefit someone, and in this case, the people who benefit from Bron being gone are the people who didn't want to compete with him for screen time, for merchandise sales, for main event spots, and they found a way to eliminate the competition without having to actually beat him in the ring. Let me also point out that Penta and Dragon Lee have not made any public statements about this incident. They haven't expressed any concern for their own safety. They haven't called for Bron to be banned, and in fact, according to some reports, they were actually surprised by how severely WWE punished Bron, and they apparently told management that they didn't think a permanent ban was necessary, but Pearce went ahead with it anyway, which tells you that this decision wasn't about protecting Penta and Dragon Lee. It was about Pearce flexing his authority and showing everyone that he's the one in charge, and anyone who challenges that authority will be made an example of. This is the kind of ego-driven decision-making that ruins companies. This is the kind of leadership that drives away talent. This is the kind of management style that creates resentment and toxicity in the workplace. And if WWE doesn't address this soon, if they don't reverse this decision or at least open up some kind of appeal process for Bron, they are going to lose a lot more than just one talented wrestler. They are going to lose the respect of their entire locker room. They are going to lose the trust of their fan base, and they are going to lose their reputation as the premier wrestling promotion in the world. Now I want you to think about what this means for the future of wrestling, because if WWE can permanently ban someone like Bron Breakker for one altercation, what's to stop them from doing the same thing to anyone else who has a moment of passion, who makes a mistake, who lets their emotions get the best of them in a heated situation? And the answer is nothing. There's nothing stopping them. And that should terrify every single person who works in this industry, because it means that job security doesn't exist anymore. It means that no matter how talented you are, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you contribute to the company, you can be gone in an instant if you do something that management doesn't like. And that's not the kind of environment that breeds excellence. That's the kind of environment that breeds fear and mediocrity. What I'm about to say might be controversial, but I think it needs to be said, and that is that Adam Pearce needs to be removed from his position as Raw General Manager, because he has proven with this decision that he is not capable of making fair and rational judgments when it comes to disciplinary matters, and he has proven that he is more interested in consolidating his own power than he is in doing what's best for the performers, what's best for the fans, and what's best for WWE as a whole. This decision to permanently ban Bron Breakker is going to go down as one of the biggest mistakes in WWE history, and years from now, when people look back on this moment, they are going to point to it as the beginning of the end of WWE's creative renaissance, because this is the moment when WWE chose corporate politics over genuine talent, this is the moment when they chose to protect their image over protecting their performers, and this is the moment when they lost sight of what made professional wrestling great in the first place. So here's what I need you to do. If you've made it this far in this video, if you're as angry about this decision as I am, I need you to make your voice heard. I need you to comment below and let me know what you think about this situation. I need you to share this video with everyone you know who's a wrestling fan. I need you to use whatever platform you have to express your outrage at what WWE has done to Bron Breakker, because the only way this decision gets reversed is if there's enough public pressure, enough fan outcry, enough negative publicity that WWE has no choice but to reconsider. And I know that sounds idealistic, I know that sounds naive, but I've seen it happen before. I've seen WWE reverse course on bad decisions when the fans made it clear that they weren't going to accept it, and I truly believe that if we all come together and demand justice for Bron Breakker, we can make a difference. This is bigger than just one wrestler. This is about the future of the entire industry. This is about whether we're going to accept a wrestling landscape where performers can be discarded at a moment's notice for political reasons, or whether we're going to demand better from the companies we support with our time and our money. And I for one am not going to stay silent while WWE destroys the career of one of the most talented young wrestlers in the world, and I hope you feel the same way. Because this is our moment to stand up and say enough is enough. This is our moment to show WWE that we won't tolerate this kind of injustice, and this is our moment to fight for Bron Breakker's future in professional wrestling. So comment, share, like, subscribe, do whatever you need to do to spread this message, because Bron Breakker deserves better, the wrestling business deserves better, and we as fans deserve better than what Adam Pearce and WWE have given us with this absolutely shameful decision to permanently ban one of the brightest stars in the industry.